Welcome, everybody, to Just Talking About Jesus. My guest today is Natasha Smith. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Jan. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
I am glad that we finally figured this out.
Yeah,
Had
that's
to
how it
get
is sometimes.
computer glitches or, operator errors. I don't know. Anyway, so glad you're here. So, we're going to talk about grief today. Heavy subject.
Yeah.
But maybe some high points and, redeeming value in that as
Mm.
well. Yeah. 2020 was a hard year for you. You had besides COVID, you were dealing with an awful lot of loss. It was your dad and two sisters, a nephew, miscarriages, still, or, oh my gosh, it's one of those would be enough.
Right.
And I think too, even thinking about miscarriages, a lot of times people don't, they feel grief, but they don't recognize it as that's what it is, right? I had three miscarriages too, and it's just like, for you and the hopes and the dreams and the loss and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it just goes deep. Well, tell me about 2020. Was that a kind of did it bring you to a defining moment of something or how was that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just thanks so much for inviting me to sit with you and chat with you about this. Just feel like it's so important to just kind of bring more awareness and just to talk about it because we still really don't talk about grief. So I really appreciate your time in doing this.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that as we talk about it, makes it it opens it up, to being able to accept it more, I think, you know.
mhm,
So not to
absolutely.
forget about it, but you know, to wrap some understanding around it.
Yes. So 2020 was absolutely a defining moment for me, because we were all kind of in our houses, like we could not really leave, and so we were really left to ourselves, left to our own thoughts, and left to all of our issues. I mean, to really sit with them, because we literally couldn't go out to do the things that we normally do to keep busy, to keep our minds off. Because I have found that that was one of the ways that I coped, by running away from the grief and staying busy. And so, 2020, I couldn't use all of my mechanisms to run from the grief that I had kind of sat with for over 30 years. And so, yeah, it was kind of, seeing all of, like, literally, when we turned on the news, we saw dead bodies, like people carting bodies out of the different facility, medical facilities. And so we saw death, like, right in front of our faces. And it was constantly talked about. And on top of that, pandemic itself and racial violence, injustice. There was a bunch of stuff's going on in a political year too. So it
Yeah.
was a lot of grief and loss and just so much. And so what when I saw that and when we were experiencing that, all I can think was everything that I was seeing on TV and around our world. I was feeling on the inside. Like I was like, oh my gosh, this is this chaos and this darkness and this death and all this grief, all this heaviness. I've been feeling like that for all these years. And it was kind of literally like this pot with a lid on it that, was boiling, and the pot, it was like it needed to come off. And so literally I started to write bits and pieces of what I was feeling and how I had been feeling, like bits and pieces of my grief story, because I had never wrote anything about it or really talked about it, really process it or anything
Mhm.
until 2020. And when I started to write a little bit about it, because I had been a blogger for years,
Mhm.
just lifestyle stuff, mommy stuff, but I started to share, my experiences with grief, like a little bit at a time, and it just began to resonate with so many people because so many people were hurting and so many people were grieving.
Yeah, and I know, and I think that's one of the important things that in our roles, with podcasting, Substack, whatever we're doing, is to just throw out there, hey, you're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not alone in this, you know.
Yes.
we probably have a lot of things that are in common, and let's do open up and talk about it.
Yes, I love that so much. It's so true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that writing is cathartic, you
Yeah.
know. I think when it's on the paper, it helps you to analyze things better, just it's almost lets you stand back and look at it,
Yes.
from another way. How did that, how was that with your relationships with your family members, other they who also suffered a lot of loss, the same losses?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it was also important for them. Again, I've learned that, to no two people grieve the same. And so in my processing, I was learning that, like my sister who had also lost her dad, we lost our dad. She grieved so much differently than I did because it took me like 3 years to go back to dad's grave. But she
Mhm.
would visit almost every day because she lived in the area. And I was like, oh my gosh, my first reaction was like, that's a bit much, you know, because I was grieving differently. I was like,
Right.
I just can't go back there.
Yeah.
But you know, I just began to learn that people grieve differently and it's okay, you
Yeah.
know, it's okay. And it taught me to give others, even we're giving each other grace. I like to call this a dance with grace. You give me grace and I give you grace to grieve in the way that you grieve and to honor that and to make space for that. And so, and I continue to do so because, again, you heard or saw the laundry list of losses that I experienced. A lot of them are collective to my family. And so, but just seeing and walking that out, like we don't all grieve the same. We grieve
Well, there's
differently.
no template for it. Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes.
And there's no right way.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And even with you saying that, it's like, and you don't know what you don't know. So,
Exactly. Exactly. After my first husband died, it's like, oh, there's like things you can expect to be happening. You might be angry. You might just be totally, laying on the floor because you can't get
right.
up, or you may be, the kinds of things that trigger that's just out of the blue. Like, where did that come from? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, just, so many things. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that
true.
are that are just natural and normal. And I think it's good to identify those kind of things. I just finished writing a Bible study, and when I went into the study of David, focused on him grieving
Oh,
because he had so many losses,
yeah.
He lost
Yeah.
his baby, he had his estranged son, which you grieve as well, or there was corporal grief when a whole army comes and grabs all your family, or
Oh,
you've got big, massive people dying and things. It was just, just to think about the different types of griefs that, he went through. And
yeah, I love that so much. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to check that out because of course, I try to deep dive into the biblical side and all the
uh,
biblical stories related to grief because again, I grew up in church and I did not hear that much about grief until
I
unless it was
know.
a funeral or memorial service. But it's threaded through the Bible. It's like we read our Bible, we know that it's there.
All the
Oh wow.
way.
All the
Yeah,
way. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to check that out because of course, we read Psalms and we
right.
hear all these things of David, but I don't particularly just say think of David. We think of Job and we think of
Yeah, yeah,
some of
yeah.
the other
Yeah,
ones familiar,
yeah.
but oh my gosh, yes, David has so many losses. Oh, anyways, I'm excited
And
to
even Bathsheba, I mean,
yeah,
because David had her husband murdered, she's got to
yeah.
deal with the grief of her husband, who seemed like a man of integrity, and you know,
Yes.
then her baby. It's kind of like, I don't know, how do you bounce back from that?
Yeah. Wow, wow, wow. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so good. That's good.
yeah, yeah. How do you think the church can help to change that dynamics or that culture in there, around grief?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot and talking about it with different friends and just recently talked kind of about it with a pastor friend. And We were just saying if there's a way to incorporate it into corporate worship, not that it has to be every Sunday, but if we could make space to have even like lament services,
Mhm.
or you know, or making space for a time of throughout the year to make
Yeah,
a special service. Like it doesn't even have to be on a Sunday morning, but a special lament service for people to bring their heavy burdens. Because when you think about it, it's like that's why we're supposed to be bringing this to church anyways.
right, right.
You
Catholics
know.
do a good job with that because they do it All
Yes.
Souls Day, and so then
Yes.
they do have, people listing out names of people that have died and done that, but maybe we Protestants need to incorporate something
Yeah.
like that in
Yeah.
our services as well, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, how do you, you know, um, one of the things I think about is just how when you're first, particularly first grieving, or especially if it's a shocking death, something like that, just how your mind freezes. And I mean, how do you get out of that? How do you, how do you get past? I mean, besides time helps with that too, but just where do you go?
Mhm. That's such a hard question. It's easy to talk about on the other side of it.
Right.
But one thing that I found, just in the research, and I kind of included in my first book, Can You Just Sit With Me, is this theory called flat brain theory. Like it's actually a science behind it. Like why, what happens to us? We're so flooded with the emotion of the loss or pain or emotions, and so it's like the emotions sit here, and it's so much that it makes our brain, we call it flat brain
Yeah,
syndrome, because we can't see clearly, we can't think straight. That's probably why they tell us not to make big decisions during those times.
exactly.
And then even I had thought about it from a spiritual perspective. That's probably why platitudes fall flat, or even when someone is trying to say, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And we're like, okay, thanks.
Right. Right. Because I'm not quite ready for that,
Not quite
at the
ready
time.
for it. And so
Yeah,
it's kind of like we're in this kind of frozen state because our emotions are so big and our emotions are so high. And one thing that I really think is key to this, especially for the believer, is having friends and community that can help surround you and to lift your arms when you can't lift them.
exactly.
You know what I mean? Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I had my granddaughter, it's a long story, but briefly, during COVID was kidnapped by her dad and then accused my daughter of viciously raping her and abusing her. During that, and none of us had any contact with her. During that time, that was grief to the max. I mean, the hardest thing ever. But I remember being at church one time, and you're walking out, and somebody saying, "Well, how are you doing?" I mean, they really wanted to know, but I was like, "Okay, I've just been bawling all day, whatever." But it's like, I need somebody to hold my arms up. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I need somebody to just, you know,
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That when we're in the fresh of it, yeah, we need help.
Yeah, yeah, you do because you can't. I interviewed Angie Clayton and she's done a lot of grief work with others too, but her message is just
Yeah.
sit beside me. Don't try and say anything
Yes,
and
that
just
is it.
you don't have to tell me that all the things that I already know. Yeah.
Yes, that is perfect. That is the title of my first book. Can you just sit with me? So
Yes.
that is the entire essence, that ministry of presence that again we haven't been taught that just sitting with someone makes a big difference.
Yeah. Oh, I love that ministry of presence.
Yeah.
That's rich. That's a great thing. So when when did you feel closest to God in the midst of these things?
Hmm. Mm. That's such a good question. I have to look at or think through different losses. There's so many losses. So
Right,
I would
right.
I would say, like, sometimes I felt far away. like um I felt abandoned by him, and I think it's really, I've come to realize, of course, that I wasn't abandoned by him because he never leaves us or forsakes us. But I came to realize that I felt that way because so many people had died.
Hmm.
And so I came to this understanding that I developed this inner vow, like those who love me leave me, because people were just dying and I
Yeah,
was being
yeah.
left. And so it left me with these abandonment type issues. But it
Mhm.
wasn't their fault that they died. You know what I
No,
mean? So
right, exactly, exactly.
yeah,
But you still feel that way.
but I still was still feeling that way, and so I had to kind of work through and process that. But what I found in trying to make sense of it and processing it, especially from a biblical spiritual standpoint, is asking God, "Where were you?"
Hmm.
And then allowing myself to be open to His Spirit to hear him and to sense where he was in those moments.
Hmm.
And when we ask those questions and we listen with our spiritual ears, he tells us. And it's just the sweetest thing because most often, and I'm getting like, anyways, because he's so loving and caring. He cares for us so deeply, and so when we ask him those things, he shows us in a way, like, of course, no big movie screen came up and but I think back, and he was there in the waiting room, when we could have all kind of lost it,
Hmm.
but there was peace that I couldn't understand.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
So he gave
totally.
me peace. He gave me a comfort that I couldn't understand, even though I'm hurting, was hurting,
Mhm.
but I felt his comfort, and I felt that he was there. And so it's been so many times that has happened. And then in the times when I felt abandoned again, I've asked that question, or I asked that question like years,
Right.
past, and then him or his presence being able to show me in a way like, no, I was there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who's going to understand grief better than Jesus and God? I mean,
Yes.
even Jesus cried.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
that's so huge to me because I one thing that I want to just keep telling people and just bringing more awareness to, especially believers, that he has felt everything that we felt, right? He's endured it all. He's our suffering savior, man of sorrows. Like, he knows and he understands, even when we feel, in which I have felt, as if no one understands. And sometimes I still can be brought back to a place where I'm like, oh, nobody cares, nobody understands. This is so hard. And I'm like, okay, Jesus knows. He cares and understands. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, God was watching his son not just die, but brutally, and
Yeah.
and the whole agony of his soul as well. I just, yeah.
Yeah.
And most of us don't go through that
No.
hard of a thing, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just unimaginable.
Yeah.
Has losing so many of your people, has it colored the way that you parent?
Absolutely. 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 Um, I talk about in my book as well, like in 2020 was the first time I allowed my kids to see me cry.
Mm,
Because growing up again, whether it be the church or just seeing my family or parents grieve because we had loss of their parents or people in my family or whatever. But you know, like, grieving was kind of um, sandwiched between when the person died and the funeral. So this is kind of like your space to get it all out. And then afterwards, you should be okay. They didn't, it wasn't said,
no, no.
but it was kind of understood.
Mhm,
Like, you
mhm.
shouldn't be crying, keep crying past funeral. Like, something is wrong if you continue to cry. And so I didn't show anyone that I didn't want anybody to see me cry,
Yeah,
especially my children, because that's how I grew up, thinking you shouldn't be doing that. And so 2020 was again that breaking year for me, and I'm like, okay, For one, I couldn't get out of the room fast enough because it was like one of my sister's birthdays, and it just came on me so fast. And then I was homeschooling, and so the kids were in the class. We were in the classroom anyways, and so I just let the tears fall. And my youngest at the time, how old was she? 5 years ago. So she was like five or so. And she was just, she came and grabbed me on my arm and she was like, Mom, Mommy, what's wrong? And I was like, I said, I'm so sad because, it's my sister's birthday, your Aunt Sharon, and I can't celebrate it with her. And she was like, it's okay, it's okay. And so, but yeah, absolutely. It's just colored my parenting in a way to in knowing what I know about just emotions in general, like you don't need to stuff them.
Mhm.
You don't need to push them aside, but we can, it's okay to cry, it's okay to be sad, to give them permission to grieve even the things. I tell this story about my son who lost a Lego. Like I'm more compassionate because my heart and my grief is different from your grief. Like your grief is hard,
Yeah.
even though I've had a lot of loss. I can't compare it to someone else's and say, oh, yours is not as bad. No, theirs is bad as because for them, you
For
know
them.
what I mean? And
Mhm.
so that's how I kind of bring it into parenting, because it's like, you know, that lost Lego it means a lot. Like seriously. Because they have tears and everything, lost teddy bears, lost,
Yeah.
and so it's, yeah, they go through a little grieving process and we can honor that too.
Yeah, I think it's good to stop and pay attention to the voices that we're hearing, or as to who's telling me that it's not okay to cry, who's not necessarily you putting it on a person, but what are the voices in our heads that somewhere came from somewhere that said, no, this is the way you're supposed to do it, and you know
Yes.
and it's not, like
Yeah.
that. So it's kind of to define, okay, I'm hearing that voice, is that really true? God, what are you saying about that? And to make that comparison.
I love that so much. I love that so much. And that's part of the process that I had to kind of take myself through, and that I kind of based on like my personal story experience and then research and then the biblical aspect. That's what I put into the book, but that's exactly what I kind of help to walk others through as well, with the like um what influenced you, the way,
Hmm.
who and what has influenced you, the way that you grieve now.
Hmm.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, you aren't going to grieve for somebody you don't care about. I
Yeah.
mean, all of that is because you care so much about them. It's
Mhm.
not just you know, your
Yeah.
grief isn't, if it's somebody that's like an acquaintance, yeah, you can go to the funeral and you kind of
Yeah.
probably be okay and go on. But someone that you deeply care about, that's why you grieve so hard,
It's so true. It's so true.
you know,
Mhm.
because you aren't going to be able to spend that time with them, and hopefully in eternity
I know.
they'll be there and we'll have forever.
Yes.
That's I mean, that's our biggest hope,
That
as
is
a
our biggest hope.
Christian, as
Yes.
a believer, is
Yes.
that we have that hope to be there. Yeah.
Yes.
So, um, did you have some kind of, have you come to some kind of steps that people can take to write out things or to help with that grief?
Yeah, I have at the end of each chapter of Can You Just Sit With Me, I have like a brief exercise that you can that people can do on their own or with a group or with a counselor, whoever. Um, but one thing that I like to say is, grief needs a place to go, instead of stuffing it. It needs a place to go. So that is whether it's writing it out or moving it out or talking it out.
Mhm.
And so that's like just a good way to think about it. Like, okay, do I have a safe person that I can talk to about it so that I can get it out that way? Or like you said, writing this lethargic, or journaling or writing it out that way, or moving it out, like literally, because emotions can be trapped we can feel it in our bodies. And so even like I know this year, or the end of last year, but I've been using it this year. I bought just one of the little mini trampolines. That's been so helpful just to kind of bounce around a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So you've written 2 books,
Yeah. Mhm.
the Sit With Me, and the title of the other one is?
Yeah. So one is Can You Just Sit With Me? Healthy Grieving for the Losses of Life. And then the other one is specific for Black woman grief, a guide to hope and wholeness. So yeah.
Mm.
Mhm.
As a white person here, can you share some things about being Black and that aspect of it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, so one of the questions that I've gotten and I love to share when I'm talking about the book is that grief is grief. We're all, at some point in our lives, we're going to experience a loss um, and grief over someone or something. And so we know that grief is a natural response to any loss. And so will have grief, right? But the types of losses is where it can vary. Um, so for Black women, it can be things that have been passed down generationally, all the way tracing all the way back to slavery. From a standpoint of, and one example that I think of often is to not share when we're hurting, or
Mm,
to not share our emotions because we're supposed to appear strong,
mm,
because of, to not appear strong, then maybe you there's some type of bad repercussion to not being strong. And so that mindset, and it's a big crazy mindset, that gets passed down. And so I need to be strong, can't show weakness, so I shouldn't grieve. So
mm,
those sorts of things. And then anything from racism to microaggressions to inequalities in workplace and um, even healthcare. There's so many things on top of just regular grieving of losses due to losses of loved ones.
mhm.
Then Black women have these additional losses as well. And so that book kind of makes space for that, because we don't, because of stereotypes as well, like the strong Black woman, um superwoman, or like we endure pain better than others, like there's so yeah, so those sorts of things are kind of listed or talked about in the book. And again, in a way where, I share personal stories, because I was one of four daughters. So it was all girls in the family, and then my mom, and then my grandma, who's still like 101. uh, yeah. And so I talk about how caregiving is so heavy in our culture as well. And so just wanted to bring awareness and make space
Mm.
for Black women to be able to talk about it, and as well as those who are not Black women to learn more, especially like ministry leaders, people, pastors, ministries who are serving multi-ethnic congregations, just to understand a little bit the losses and grief that we experience.
That sounds so important. That is like, yeah, I'm gonna have to get that book. Yeah. So, where can people find you?
Thank you so much. I am across social media at I am Natasha Smith, and my website at iamnatashasmith.com, and books wherever books are sold.
Okay, okay. That'll be so great to be able to share all of that. I'm anxious to do this because I think it's going to be just it's just so important.
Yeah. Thank
So
you
I
so much again for inviting me on.
absolutely. In 1985, when I was 30 and my husband was 36, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. After the surgery, he was left paralyzed. We had 3 children, and it was just a time where God brought us closer to him in ways that we never could have imagined. In the 2 years that he had the tumor, he started writing in his journal every day, and He was just the things that God was doing with him throughout. And it was so, so rich that after I read it, I knew that I needed to publish something so that the world could see that. So this is our story, his and mine together, and just something that I know you would be blessed with. Prologue, 1985, Warrenton, Oregon. Red and amber lights whir rhythmically, reflecting on the bedroom mirror. I am only aware of the pulse of my heart as it beats rapidly in my ears. The ambulance is here, Mom, Nick says. Mom, the ambulance is here. He tugs on my arm. I look through the window and then at my son. I still can't believe this is happening. I knew it was only going to be one more year. That's the answer I had gotten in April when I had asked God how much longer all this was going to last. But still, Howard Ray, my husband, had been doing so well. Even tonight, he had said,
Well, I guess the doctors are going to be wrong again. They said 2 years, and look how well I'm doing.
Tonight I went to my friend Mary Ann Reed's to spend a respite evening visiting. Howard took care of the kids alone. Granted, Sarah was 6 and able to do a lot of things for herself, and I'm sure Nick helped get 3-year-old Kyle into his PJs. Nevertheless, Howard had read them stories, gotten them tucked in, and managed mostly on his own. How did everything go? I asked when I returned. I didn't get any frantic phone calls from you.
No, it was great. I'm glad you were able to get a break.
I give him a goodnight peck on his bearded cheek and head to bed.
I'll see you about 11. I still want to do some Bible reading and write some more in my journal.
I won't see you, I reply as usual, not realizing this would be our last conversation. I'll be sleeping. Good night. I purse my lips and smack a kiss toward him. It's 3 a.m. Howard comes into the bedroom calling my name.
Jan!
Slurred, anxious, I bolt up in bed, awakening from a deep sleep. What's going on? Are you having a seizure? He's holding his head with both of his hands.
My head hurts. It hurts.
He moans. I grab him by the shoulders and sit him down on the bed. What should I do? What should I do? His eyes are vacant. He falls back onto the handmade quilt of our king-size bed. I look around, like there might be an answer on the wall or the ceiling. Like everything else on this long road, there might magically appear writing on the wall to guide me. Was this it? Was this how he was going to die? He didn't want to die in hospital. But what should I do? I grab his bottle of phenobarbital from the nightstand. My shaky hands open the bottle and take one out. I try to get him to swallow a sip of water. He begins to spasm and retch. I look around for something, a towel, a bowl, anything. I run upstairs to get Nick. He's only 11, but he's been my little man there when I needed him. And right now, I need him to stay with his dad while I make frantic phone calls. Who should I call? Who would answer at 3 a.m? I try our friend Nancy McGathan, who's a nurse from church and has been with us on more than one occasion. I listen for Howard. Hurry and pick up. After the 4th ring, I hang up. Any person in their right mind would sleep right now. Now what? God, what should I do? I could try Mary Ann, but she's going to tell me to call an ambulance. Okay then, that's what it's going to be. I'm sorry, Howard. I know you don't want to go this way. I know how much you hate hospitals. I open the front door and let the men in. They wheel in a gurney, through the kitchen, down the hall, around the corner into our bedroom. Now Howard lies on the bed, eyes closed, his paralyzed right hand twitching. They lift him onto the gurney, cover him with a warm blanket and roll him to the ambulance, made easier because of the newly installed ramp. I stand, stunned, staring at the empty place in the bed, the place that will no longer hold my husband. Lord, is this it? Is this the end? And then an audible voice. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I look around to see which man had said it. No, they were outside putting him into the ambulance. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I repeat. This is it, Lord, isn't it? He's going home, isn't he? He's going home.